When Daniel met Clara, he was 24. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, and he didn't think of himself as particularly special. He worked as an assistant manager at a hardware store, rented a small one-bedroom apartment, and sent a little money home to his parents every month. He was the kind of man people described as reliable, more than exciting. Clara was different. She was 21, vibrant, talkative, and magnetic. When she walked into a room, people noticed. She laughed loudly, dressed brightly, and spoke about big dreams, travel, business, a future where she'd never have to worry about money again. They met through a mutual friend at a birthday party. Daniel noticed her immediately, but assumed she was out of his league. It was a surprise when, a week later, she messaged him on social media. They started talking. Talking turned into late-night calls. Late-night calls turned into dates. And before long, Daniel was in love. He loved the way she saw potential in him. She'd tell him, "You're too smart to stay in that job forever," or "You're going to be a great father someday." For a man who'd always blended into the background, her attention felt like sunlight. 6 months into the relationship, she called him one afternoon, her voice shaky. "Daniel, we need to talk." He rushed over to her tiny rented room, heart pounding. He imagined the worst, a breakup, a confession, a goodbye. Instead, she took his hand, placed it gently on her still flat abdomen, and whispered, "I'm pregnant. The child is yours." The words stunned him. His mind raced. He hadn't been planning for a baby. He didn't feel ready. His savings were small, his career just beginning, his life still forming. But as he looked into Clara's eyes, tearful, scared, vulnerable, he felt something else rise inside him. Responsibility. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded quickly. "Yes, it's yours. I'm late. I tested twice. I was so scared to tell you. I don't know what to do." He took a deep breath. His own father had always told him, "If you create a life, you stand by it. No excuses." That sentence echoed in his mind. He squeezed her hand and said, "Okay, we'll figure it out. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." From that moment, his life rearranged itself around a child he had never seen and a future he had never planned. Within a month, he'd picked up extra shifts at work. He started skipping nights out with friends to save money. He sat with Clara and talked about baby names, tiny clothes, and where they might live. His friends were shocked when just 3 months later he announced, "We're getting married." "Are you sure, man? It's all so fast," one friend said carefully. "She's pregnant," Daniel replied. "It's my responsibility. I want to do the right thing." Everyone respected that. He felt proud of his decision. Scared, yes, but also proud. He believed he was stepping up. He believed he was doing what a real man should do. What he didn't know was that this decision, made with honor and love, would be built on a lie. The pregnancy became the center of their world. Clara leaned fully into the role of an expecting mother. She posted ultrasound photos online with captions like, "Can't wait to meet you, little one," and tagged Daniel as daddy-to-be. Her family welcomed him, calling him son at family dinners. "Take care of our daughter and that baby," her mother would say, half joking, half commanding. He'd smile and say, "I will. I promise." They had a small, modest wedding at a local hall. He wore a rented suit. She wore a simple dress that gently hugged her swelling belly. There was food, music, laughter, and shaky phone videos of them dancing awkwardly but happily. In those moments, Daniel was sure he was doing the right thing. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment, more expensive than his old place, but for the baby, Tihoy. "Maiiya," he told himself. He assembled the crib by hand. He painted one wall a soft, neutral color, since they wanted the baby's gender to be a surprise. He budgeted carefully. He gave up most luxuries. No new clothes, no new phone, no trips. He watched videos on how to be a good father, read articles about infant care, and listened to podcasts on parenting during his bus rides to work. In quiet moments, he'd put his hand on Clara's belly and talk to the baby. "Hey, it's your dad," he'd whisper. "I'm working hard so you can have a good life. I can't wait to meet you." Sometimes the baby would kick. He took that as a sign that he was already connected, already chosen. It never crossed his mind, not once, that the child might not be his. The day the baby arrived, Daniel felt like the world had paused. It was a long labor. He held Clara's hand, wiped sweat from her forehead, and murmured encouragement while nurses moved efficiently around them. Finally, a cry pierced the air. A baby's cry. He watched, mesmerized, as a tiny, slippery, crying human was lifted, wiped, and wrapped in a soft blanket. "It's a boy," the nurse said. Daniel felt his chest tighten. A son. His son. They placed the baby in his arms for the first time. The baby's face was scrunched, eyes closed, mouth open in a protest against this new, bright, cold world. Daniel looked down and felt something shift inside him. A mixture of fear, awe, and fierce protectiveness. "Hey," he whispered, "I'm your dad." Right there, in that hospital room, he made an unspoken vow. "I will take care of you. I will never abandon you. I will be better than anything I ever lacked." When people came to visit, they commented on how deeply he looked at the baby, how tenderly he held him. "He's already a natural father," someone said. He smiled, exhausted but glowing with purpose. They named the baby Noah. The first years were a blur of sleepless nights, diapers, crying fits, and tiny, beautiful milestones. Noah's first smile, Noah's first word, Noah's first wobbling steps across their small living room, arms outstretched toward Daniel. Every time Noah called, "Daddy!" Daniel's heart swelled. He worked long hours to keep up with expenses. Boxes of baby formula weren't cheap. Doctor visits, vaccines, clothes, daycare, little toys, everything added up. He didn't complain. He just worked. Meanwhile, Clara stayed home with the baby for the first year, then eventually took on a part-time job. She often said she was tired, overwhelmed, and underappreciated. "You don't understand how hard it is to be with a baby all day," she'd say. "I know it's hard," he'd reply gently. "I'm trying my best too. We're doing this together." They fought sometimes, about money, about chores, about who was more exhausted. But in front of Noah, they tried to stay calm. When Noah turned 5, they celebrated with a small party. Balloons, cake, little friends from preschool. That night, after everyone left and the apartment was quiet, Daniel watched his son sleep. He noticed something for the first time. He didn't know why it suddenly stood out, but it did. Noah didn't really look like him. People had always said, "Oh, he has his mother's nose," or "he has his grandma's eyes." Nobody ever pointed out any resemblance to Daniel. He brushed the thought aside. Kids took after different relatives. Genes were strange. It didn't matter. He was his father. He had been there since day one. That was what counted. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a tiny seed of doubt quietly planted itself. He ignored it. Years passed. Noah grew into a bright, curious teenager. He loved computers, video games, and science documentaries. He didn't share Daniel's interest in tools, fixing things, or practical hands-on work. Instead, he talked about coding, robots, and space travel. Daniel was proud. His son might do what he never could, go to college, maybe study engineering or computer science. He encouraged it. Still, as Noah grew older, strangers sometimes made awkward comments. "You two don't look anything alike." "Are you sure he's yours? He looks so different." They always laughed it off. "Kids can look very different from their parents," Clara would say, rolling her eyes. "Don't be silly," she'd add. "Of course he's his father's son." Not once did she hesitate. Not once did her voice shake. That confidence reassured Daniel just enough to keep pushing the doubts down. But there were other cracks forming, this time in the marriage. Clara became more distant. She started going out with friends more often, dressing up more, coming home late. When he asked where she'd been, she'd snap, "I'm tired of feeling trapped in this house. I'm not just a wife and a mother. I have a life too." He didn't want to be controlling. He didn't want to accuse her unfairly. so he swallowed his unease and focused on being a good father. He attended Noah's school events, parent-teacher meetings, science fairs. He clapped the loudest when his son won a small robotics competition. He helped with homework every night he could, even when his eyes were burning from exhaustion. He loved his son. That he was sure of. No matter how shaky the marriage felt, his bond with Noah was solid. Or so he believed. The truth began to unravel on an ordinary afternoon. No drama, no screaming, just a simple, careless comment from a stranger. Daniel had taken Noah, now 17, to a routine dentist appointment. While they were waiting, another man in the room kept glancing at them. Finally, he said, almost jokingly, "Is that your son?" "Yes," Daniel replied proudly. The man smiled, then frowned slightly. "Interesting. He looks a lot like a guy I used to work with years ago. Same eyes, same jaw. You said you're his father, right?" Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Why?" The man shrugged. "Nothing. Just striking resemblance to my old coworker, Marcus. That's all. Weird coincidence." The name hit Daniel like a small, unexpected punch. Marcus. He knew that name. Marcus had been one of Clara's neighbors years ago. A man who used to come over sometimes for group hangouts before they got married. Daniel had never thought much of him. The comment stayed in his head for days. He tried to shake it off. Coincidences happened, right? People looked like each other all the time. But the seed of doubt, planted years ago, began to grow. He started replaying memories. The time he'd walked in on Clara, laughing a little too much at a joke Marcus told. The way she'd abruptly stopped talking to him once the relationship with Daniel got serious. The way she'd refused to let Daniel meet some of her early friends. He remembered the timeline. She'd found out she was pregnant only a few months into their relationship. How sure had he really been back then? He did the math, the dates, the overlaps. For the first time in 17 years, he let himself ask a terrifying question. What if the child isn't mine? 8. The DNA test. The idea haunted him. He didn't sleep well for weeks. He stared at Noah's face, searching for himself, searching for any resemblance. He found none. He noticed little things, blood type, family traits, medical history. None of it seemed to match. But a voice in his head scolded him. "How can you doubt your own son? You've raised him for 17 years. You were there for everything. Doesn't that matter more than biology?" It did, but the doubts wouldn't stop. One night, after everyone went to bed, he sat alone in the living room, phone in hand, and typed into a search bar. How to get a paternity test without the mother knowing. He stared at the results, feeling guilty and sick. He ordered a home DNA kit. It arrived in a plain box a week later. He hid it in his wardrobe. For days, he couldn't bring himself to open it. Then, one Saturday morning, Clara announced she was going out for the day with her friends. Noah was at home, studying at his desk. Heart pounding, Daniel walked into Noah's room. "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" he asked. "Sure, Dad, what's up?" Noah replied, looking up from his laptop. Daniel swallowed hard. I saw this thing online," he began slowly. "A test that looks at genetics. It can give you information about health risks, ancestry, that kind of thing. I thought it'd be interesting for both of us to try. You know, like a father-son thing." It was a lie, but right now he felt he needed it. Noah's eyes lit up. "Oh, like those DNA ancestry things? That's cool. Yeah, I'm down." Relief and shame washed over Daniel at the same time. They followed the instructions together. Swabs, cheek samples, carefully sealing them in the provided containers. Noah joked through the process, saying, "Watch it say I'm 5% Viking or something." Daniel forced a laugh. After his son went back to his desk, Daniel quietly completed the form, checking the box that included paternity analysis. He mailed it the next day. Then came the waiting. Every day felt heavier than the last. He went to work, cooked dinner, watched TV with his family, but mentally, he was elsewhere, hovering between two realities. One where he was simply a paranoid fool, and one where his entire life had been built on a lie. The email arrived on a Wednesday evening. He opened his inbox and saw the subject line, "Your DNA test results are ready." His hands began to tremble. He went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat, staring at his phone screen. For a long moment, he couldn't bring himself to tap. Finally, he did. The report loaded slowly. He scrolled down, past the ancestry breakdown and health markers, until he found the section he'd been avoiding, paternity analysis. He clicked. A short line of text appeared. His heart pounded. Then he read the words that shattered 18 years of his life. Based on the genetic markers tested, the probability that Daniel is the biological father of Noah is 0.00%. Zero. Not low. Not unlikely. Zero. He felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. His breath came in short bursts. He stared at the screen, hoping he'd misread, that maybe it was saying the opposite, but the words didn't change. He was not the father. For 17 years, he had loved, sacrificed, planned, and built his life around a lie. The lie that began with 4 words, "The child is yours." For 2 days, Daniel said nothing. He went about his routine like a ghost inhabiting his own body. He made breakfast. He asked Noah about school. He listened to Clara talk about her day. But inside, something had broken. On the 3rd night, he couldn't hold it in any longer. After dinner, when Noah had gone to his room, Daniel turned to Clara. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, a bit annoyed. "About what?" He took a deep breath and placed his phone on the table between them, the DNA result open on the screen. "About this." She glanced down lazily. At first, her face showed no reaction. Then, as she realized what she was looking at, her eyes widened. The color drained from her face. "Daniel, what is this?" she whispered. "It's a DNA test," he replied, his voice shaking but controlled. "I did it with Noah. I told him it was for ancestry, but I included a paternity test." She stared at him, breathing harder. "And?" she asked, though she could already see the answer. "And it says there's a 0% chance that I'm his biological father." Silence filled the room. He waited. She said nothing. He felt a wave of anger rise inside him, anger he had never allowed himself to fully feel before. "Clara," he said, his voice now firm, "I have raised that boy for 17 years. I changed his diapers. I worked 2 jobs. I gave up my dreams. I married you because you told me you were pregnant with my child. So I'm going to ask this once, and I need you to tell me the truth." He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "Whose child is he?" She looked away, her hands shaking. Her voice came out small, weak. It was a mistake. It was before we were really serious. I didn't think it would matter. You loved me. You wanted a family." "Whose child is he?" Daniel repeated, louder. She swallowed. "Marcus," she whispered. The name slammed into him like a physical blow. "So you were pregnant before we got serious?" he demanded. Tears began to stream down her face. "I was confused," she cried. "I didn't know who the father was at first." "Then you were so kind, so supportive. You stepped up. You wanted to be there. I thought, what difference does it make? You'd be a better father than Marcus ever could be." He stared at her in disbelief. "So you decided for me," he said slowly. "You decided my life. You decided my child. You let me believe—" His voice broke. "You let me believe he was mine." She reached out for his hand. "Daniel, please! You are his father. Maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. You raised him. You love him. Biology doesn't change that." He pulled his hand back. "That's not your decision to make," he said, his voice cold now. "You took away my right to choose. You trapped me in a lie for 17 years. He stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How many times," he asked bitterly, "did you look at me and say, 'The child is yours,' knowing there was a chance he wasn't? How many years did you watch me sacrifice everything for a child you knew might not be mine, and said nothing. She sobbed, covering her face. I was scared. I thought you'd leave. I thought I'd lose everything. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, he said quietly. You hurt me in the deepest way possible. He turned away, tears finally spilling from his own eyes. And now, he whispered, I don't even know who I am in this house anymore. The days that followed were chaos. Daniel slept on the couch. He barely spoke to Clara. He moved through the house like a stranger, numb and hollow. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the confusion. Because despite everything, every time he saw Noah, his heart still responded as a father's would. When Noah laughed at a video, when he asked for help with a school project, when he looked tired and stressed, Daniel still cared. Deeply. He had known this boy since birth. He had comforted him through nightmares, school bullies, illnesses, heartbreaks. He had watched him grow into a young man. Now he had to somehow hold two truths in his mind at once. I am not his biological father, and he is my son. Those truths did not cancel each other. They coexisted, painfully. He decided not to tell Noah immediately. The boy was weeks away from important exams. Daniel told himself, I'll wait. I won't destroy his world right now. Mine is already shattered. There's no need to shatter his too. But secrets have their own gravity. Clara begged him to keep quiet permanently. Please, Daniel, she said one night, her voice hoarse from crying. He doesn't need to know. You'll ruin his life. You'll ruin everything. Can't we just move on? Pretend this never happened? He looked at her in disbelief. Move on? He repeated. You kept a lie for 17 years, and your solution is more lying? She whispered. I was wrong. I know that. But you're his father in every way that counts. Don't take that away from him, or from yourself. He shook his head slowly. I didn't create this mess, he said. You did. He didn't shout. By now his anger had cooled into something heavier and more dangerous, a deep, quiet resolve. He knew what he had to do next. The moment finally came one evening when he found Noah sitting at the dining table, books spread out, looking exhausted. Hey, son, Daniel said, sitting down beside him. Hey, Dad, Noah replied without looking up. That single word, Dad, stabbed him in the chest. Can we talk? Daniel asked. Noah glanced at him, sensing something serious in his tone. Sure, what's going on? Daniel took a deep breath. He had rehearsed this in his mind 100 times, but it still felt impossible. You remember the DNA test we did? The ancestry thing? He began. Yeah, Noah said. Did the results come back? Am I part Viking? He tried to laugh, but it died when he saw his father's face. Something came up in the results, Daniel said slowly. Something important. And I need to tell you the truth, even though it's going to be hard to hear. Noah frowned, confused. Okay, he said cautiously. Daniel's voice trembled. The test, it included a paternity analysis. I asked it to check if I was your biological father. Noah's eyes widened. Why would you do that? He asked, hurt and confused. What, you don't trust Mom? You don't trust me? It wasn't about trust in you, Daniel said quickly. I started having doubts. Some things didn't add up. I shouldn't have done it without telling you first. That was wrong. But the results came back. He swallowed hard. And it says that there is a 0% chance that I am your biological father. The words hung between them. Noah just stared at him, unblinking. Silence. Then he shook his head, forcing a weak laugh. That's not funny, Dad. I'm not joking, Daniel said softly, eyes wet. I wish I were. Noah's face crumpled. What do you mean? He whispered. How is that possible? Daniel's voice broke as he replied. It means that your mother was pregnant by another man when she told me you were mine. It means I'm not your biological father. But I didn't know. Noah, I swear to you, I didn't know. Noah stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly. Who is my father, then? He demanded. Daniel hesitated. It's someone your mother knew before me, a man named Marcus. Noah's breathing quickened. So you're telling me that my entire life, my entire identity, has been a lie? He shouted. Daniel's heart shattered. No, he said urgently, standing too. Your life isn't a lie. Who you are isn't a lie. I have been your father in every way I know how. I have loved you, raised you, provided for you. That was never fake. But you're not my real dad, Noah snapped, the word real slicing through Daniel. The man flinched, pain flickering across his face. I may not be your biological father, he said quietly, but every feeling I've ever had for you has been real. Every decision, every sacrifice. That love was never based on a DNA test. Tears streamed down Noah's face. Did Mom know? He asked, his voice small now. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, she did. Noah covered his face with his hands and let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a scream. He turned and ran to his room, slamming the door. Daniel didn't follow. He stood in the silent living room, listening to his son, the boy he had raised, but who now felt suddenly out of reach, cry on the other side of the wall. In that moment, he realized something painful. The lie had not only trapped him, it had trapped Noah too. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The house became a battlefield of quiet tension and explosive arguments. Noah confronted his mother, demanding the truth. There were shouting matches, accusations, tears. For the first time in his life, he saw his parents not as unshakable figures, but as flawed, fragile humans. Daniel, meanwhile, found himself in a strange limbo. Legally, he was still Noah's father. His name was on the birth certificate. For 18 years, he had paid for everything. In the eyes of the law, that mattered. When he consulted a lawyer, he learned just how complicated it all was. Paternity fraud is real, the lawyer told him, but proving intent, getting reimbursed, or undoing years of legal fatherhood is extremely difficult. The courts often prioritize stability for the child over the emotional and financial harm to the deceived man. So you're telling me, Daniel said slowly, that I can't get back anything I spent, that I might still be financially responsible, even though he's not biologically mine. And she, the person who lied, just walks away? The lawyer sighed. It's not about what's fair, he replied. It's about what the law can and cannot do. You can pursue legal action, but it will be long, expensive, and emotionally draining. And at the end of the day, you need to ask yourself what you want most: punishment, compensation, or peace. Peace. The word felt far away. At home, Noah avoided him. He answered questions with one-word responses. He shut down whenever Daniel tried to talk about feelings. From Noah's perspective, two things were true and deeply painful. One, the man he'd called Dad had done a secret DNA test behind his back. Two, his mother had lied to them both for his entire life. He didn't know who to be angry at, so he was angry at everyone. For Noah, the revelation shook the foundation of who he was. He started asking himself new, terrifying questions. If my father isn't my father, then who am I? Where do I come from? What else in my life is a lie? He researched his biological father, Marcus, online. He found an old social media profile, some photos, a job listing in another city. The man looked a bit like him. Same jawline, same eyes. But he was a stranger. One night, Noah approached Daniel hesitantly. Did you ever meet him? He asked. Once or twice, Daniel said, surprised. Years ago, before you were born. Why? Noah stared at the floor. Do you think I should try to meet him? He asked. The question pierced Daniel deeply. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say, you don't need him, you have me. But he knew this wasn't about what he wanted. It was about what Noah needed to heal. So, with effort, he forced himself to say, I think, if it's important to you, then yes. You have the right to know where you come from, but do it carefully. Protect your heart. Just because someone is biologically connected to you doesn't mean they'll give you the love you deserve. Noah nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. Do you hate me? He asked suddenly. The question stunned Daniel. Hate you? He repeated. No, never. Not for a second. None of this is your fault. You didn't lie. You didn't choose this. You're innocent. But you look at me differently now, Noah whispered. Daniel shook his head vigorously. No, he said, voice firm. I look at you the same way I always have, as my son. My pain is not because of who you are. It's because of what was done to us. He stepped closer. Can I hug you? He asked quietly. Noah hesitated, then nodded. They hugged, through tears, through confusion, through betrayal. They held on to a love that biology hadn't created and a DNA test couldn't destroy. Some lies can be forgiven. Others permanently change the relationship they've poisoned. For Daniel, the paternity lie was the latter. He could not imagine staying with a woman who had watched him sacrifice for 18 years under a falsehood she had created. A woman who had looked him in the eyes year after year and allowed him to believe a story she knew might not be true. The trust was gone, the intimacy shattered, the respect extinguished. He filed for separation, and eventually divorce. Clara begged him to reconsider. Think about Noah, she pleaded. Think about our family. I am thinking about him, Daniel replied. And I'm thinking about the example I set. Staying in a marriage built on disrespect and deception is not the model I want to give him. She cried, blamed stress, youth, fear, confusion. She said, You don't understand what it's like to be pregnant and alone. He didn't argue. Maybe all of that was true, but it didn't erase the fact that, at every point along the way, she could have chosen honesty. She didn't, and that had consequences. After the divorce, Daniel moved into a small apartment not far from the old family home. He and Noah agreed on one thing. Their relationship, whatever DNA said, mattered too much to lose. They started having regular meetups. Sometimes they'd eat together, sometimes they'd watch movies, sometimes they'd just talk. Their conversations changed. Noah no longer saw his father as an invincible, unquestionable authority. He saw him as a man, flawed, hurt, but honest. Daniel, in turn, began to speak more openly about his feelings, his mistakes, his confusion. They talked about the difference between being a father and being a donor. They talked about choice. I chose you, Daniel said one day, sitting across from his son at a cafe. Even before I knew the truth, I chose to be your father. I chose to show up. I chose to stay. The DNA test didn't erase those years. Noah nodded slowly. I get that now, he said. And I'm glad you did. I don't know who I'd be without you. He paused. Have you forgiven Mom? He asked. Daniel thought for a long moment. I'm working on it, he said honestly. Not for her, for me. Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life angry. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. And it doesn't mean I go back. Noah looked down. She lied to both of us, he said quietly. Sometimes I feel like I don't even know her. She's still your mother, Daniel replied. She made a terrible choice. A selfish one. But she also did things right. She cared for you, fed you, held you when you were sick. People are complicated. You're allowed to be angry at her and still love her. Those feelings can coexist. Years later, when the dust had settled, Daniel found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. He realized that this story, his story, wasn't just about paternity fraud. It was about the power of a single lie, the weight of responsibility, the meaning of fatherhood. He came to understand a few harsh truths. Lies about paternity don't just affect wallets. They affect identity, trust, mental health, and the core of how people see themselves and each other. Doing the right thing with incomplete information can destroy your life if that information was manipulated. His decision to step up as a father was honorable, but it was made in a rigged situation, a situation shaped by someone else's deception. Fatherhood is not just biological, but biology still matters. We often say, the man who raises you is your real father. That's true in many emotional and practical ways. But biology does matter to many people. It matters for medical history, for identity, and for the fundamental right to know the truth about your origins. Children are always the collateral damage of adult lies. Noah didn't ask for any of this. He was the most innocent person in the story, yet he carried some of the deepest pain. But there were also softer truths. Love can survive truth. The love between Daniel and Noah did not dissolve when the DNA results came back. It bent. It broke briefly. It hurt. But it reformed into something more mature, more honest. Truth has a cost, but so does silence. If Daniel had never sought the truth, he might have lived a quieter life. But it would have been built on an illusion. The lie would still be there, controlling him. The pain of revelation is sharp, but the pain of illusion is endless.